from you, which you be OJ, if they can't take the money from you, to take you from the money.
During this, he also claimed this is what they done to OJ Simpson. In this video, we're gonna take a look into this and how Suge Knight, in a recent conversation from prison, alluded that Jay Prince may have been snitching for not going to jail when it all went down. In the early 2000s, after Suge Knight was released from prison in 2001, three music industry CEOs got together, with this being Suge Knight of the West Coast, Irv Gotti of the East Coast, and Jay Prince from the South. Jay Prince, during his Joe Rogan Experience interview in 2020, described how the CEOs were going to group together to form the very first black-owned distribution service and unionize the music industry. This would have given the three dominion over all the other record labels, as those under the union who were signed to the other labels could use the union against their own labels through the power of the venture which was about to be formed. With the distribution service, this would have given them control over the narrative, as they would have been the ones greenlighting the music for distribution, which is where most of the money is within the music industry, which would have made all three of them billionaires. Therefore, this venture would have made the three CEOs extremely powerful, and they would have taken a huge portion of the music market, and along with this, they would have controlled the narrative of popular culture due to the distribution aspect. All three of the CEOs believed the room was either bugged or somebody in the room was an informant, as right after the plans were discussed, all three were almost simultaneously brought up on charges. Suge Knight's charges came from the LAPD, which landed him back in jail, Irv Gotti with the FBI, which bankrupted his company with years of a federal trial, and Jay Prince with the DEA, who had a contract out on his life. Suge Knight and the offices of his record label were raided by the LAPD in November of 2002 for murder charges, which occurred just shortly after the discussion. Suge Knight's home and offices were raided, and several of his artists and employees were arrested, which temporarily brought a cease to his operations. Soon after, Suge Knight was sent back to prison in 2003. In the early 2000s, Irv Gotti was breaking records within the music industry, holding the Guinness World Record from 2001 to 2002 for having the most consecutive top 10 singles within the music charts. A few months after Suge Knight's raid by the LAPD in November of 2002, when 2003 rolled around, the FBI began to build a case on Irv Gotti. In 2003, the FBI began to build a case on Irv Gotti for his connection to Kenneth Supreme McGriff. Supreme is an American who was formerly convicted for drug trafficking who was from Queens, New York, United States. In 1981, he was a major drug trafficker in New York for crack cocaine, once the influence came through from the Iran-Contra scandal. In 1989, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison and was released in 1994, but he violated his parole and was sent back to prison until 1997. Supreme was looking to get into the film industry and asked Irv Gotti for some help in producing the movies. The FBI used this as an excuse to go after Irv Gotti. A very short while after Suge Knight's offices were raided, Irv Gotti's Manhattan offices of Murder Inc. were raided, including other places. Irv Gotti and his brother Chris were charged with money laundering, and they had faced a sentence of 20 years in prison for financial transactions to Supreme for the production of a movie. Over the next 2 years, Murder Inc. had gone from a record-breaking company to not only losing all of its artists, but also being bankrupted, as US intelligence and the justice system dragged Irv Gotti through legal cases to bring a cease to his operation and collapse his company. Irv Gotti was unable to do any business at all, as all financial transactions would have been seen as becoming his co-defendant, so he could no longer partake in commerce or business. On December 2nd, 2005, after bringing his company to financial ruin, he and his brother were acquitted of all charges. As for the case of Jay Prince, it was the DEA who was sent after him. Jay Prince hired an investigator to look into DEA agent Jack Schumacher, who was allegedly hired to kill Jay Prince, after he, Suge Knight and Irv Gotti planned to unionize the music industry in the early 2000s. In May of 2018, Jay Prince posted onto Instagram a video about the DEA agents with the caption being, "They finally caught one of the 2 DEA agents assigned to take my life over a decade ago. The hitman and his sidekick Chad Scott were assigned to destroy me and Rap-A-Lot Records around the same time Murder Inc. and Death Row was being attacked by law enforcement agencies," unquote. Jay Prince's investigation led him to find that the DEA agent who was assigned to kill him had publicly murdered 8 people in the past before even being promoted to become a DEA agent. In 2018, Chad Scott was convicted by a federal jury on 7 counts. He was accused of perjury, obstruction of justice, and falsifying government records, along with a host of other allegations. The charges were stemming from Scott's work as a DEA agent in Louisiana after he was transferred out of the Houston area. Jay Prince claims his investigation led him to find out that 2 corrupt DEA agents were assigned to murder him after the feds found out about the venture to unionize the music industry and start a distribution company.
We have to look at Suge Knight, we have to look at Irv Gotti, and we have to look at Jay Prince. These gentlemen that got together and was going to put up $30 million apiece to get in and create their own distribution company. They raided the offices of these brothers.
The 3 had each put up $30 million to unionize record labels and go into competition through distribution against the Big Four and their subsidiaries. The Big Four are Warner Music Group, EMI, Universal, and Sony. They control and own 85% of the music industry. Warner Music Group was formed in 1991 from Time Warner. Time Warner was formed from a merger between Time Inc. and Warner Communications in 1989. Time Inc.'s senior executive was once General Charles Douglas Jackson, who was actually a mediator for information between the CIA and the Pentagon. He was a United States government propagandist who was an expert in psychological warfare who used the techniques throughout Time magazine. This means through the merger, Warner Music Group has or had connections to this company since 1989, with it being Time Inc. who once had their senior executive as General Charles Douglas Jackson, who was a mediator for the CIA. In the 1990s, Warner Music Group purchased a 22% share of the domestic music market in America. 3 music industry CEOs had planned to start a union which covered all the artists in the United States who belonged to the Big Four labels. A labor union is an association of workers forming a legal unit which acts as a bargaining agent and legal representative for a unit of employees. The union planned to clean up the music industry by making sure artists were being paid fairly and also have ownership over their music and other benefits. With the union, the 3 executives would have power and control over the Big Four labels and all of their artists. The distribution company which the 3 were looking to start would have also gone into direct competition with the Big Four.
You gotta have your distributors, and the distributors used to be 7, now it's like down to 4. So before you start picking on record labels and saying what the record labels doing, you gotta understand what the distributors doing. It's about distributing the music, putting it in the stores. If you don't have that, what do you have?
It's true.
That's the control.
This is when several agencies came after them, including the LAPD, the FBI, and the DEA. Some of these belong to the US intelligence community, which work separately and together on investigations being of threats to national security. They get information from civilian intelligence, including confidential informants, along with wiretaps. Former FBI asset Kevin Hackey was placed undercover by the FBI and ATF to infiltrate Suge Knight's label Death Row Records, whereas posing as a bodyguard being undercover, he confirmed during an interview that the FBI had wiretaps on Suge Knight's offices and personal communication. For the case of Irv Gotti himself, along with many others, have come to believe that one of these civilian confidential informants was rapper 50 Cent. 50 Cent, who was also from New York, was connected to Supreme McGriff through a shooting where 50 Cent was shot 9 times. Paperwork revealed by law enforcement later claimed that law enforcement believes Supreme McGriff set up the shooting of 50 Cent back in the year of 2000, which was orchestrated through pager messages with Irv Gotti's employees from Murder Inc. Irv Gotti believes that officials approached 50 Cent after the shooting and he cooked up fabricated stories about Murder Inc. and Supreme to help the FBI build a case against him.
As the prosecution presented its case, they seemed obsessed with having the attempted murder of 50 Cent allowed into evidence. After 2 days of tense deliberations and sidebars, Judge Edward Corman ruled the jury would not hear about the shooting or how it tied into the charges of money laundering against Irv and Chris.
All 3 of the CEOs believed they were targeted by an operation which was used against them to bring the venture to a standstill.
Feds hit all of us at the same time, which I don't think was a coincidence.
In a 2021 conversation from prison, Suge Knight spoke on the case of Jay Prince.
There was any illegal activities going on. When they came with him, his best friend, who he do business with, ended up doing 20 years. If you going to prison for something and the person hanging with you doing the same thing with you, they're supposed to go too, right?
While speaking from prison in 2021, Suge Knight spoke on the case of Jay Prince, speaking on how Jay Prince's business partner got charged with 20 years for a drug case, while Jay Prince never went to prison.
They destroyed and dismantled Murder Inc. You know, they done Suge pretty bad, and I was the last one standing.
In an older prison interview, Suge Knight claimed that people who get